Vengeance is terrifying when it comes from someone young enough to still believe in fairness, intelligent enough to breach systems designed by experts, and motivated enough to hunt the person who destroyed their family. Chin Hae-yong discovered this lesson in his fortified compound in Taipei, when his elite security systems, designed by the best cybersecurity experts money could buy, protected by multiple redundancies and fail-safes, were systematically breached over 3 weeks by someone who left no trace except a single message displayed on every screen in his organization: "I found you. You abandoned my mother. Now you answer to me." The breach was traced to an 8-year-old boy in Los Angeles who'd taught himself advanced coding, penetrated criminal security infrastructure that protected billions in illegal operations, and executed one of the most sophisticated cyberattacks in organized crime history. All to identify and confront the father who'd walked away from his pregnant mother 9 years ago. The story started 9 years earlier, when Chin Hae was 36 and running Korean organized crime operations throughout Asia and the western United States. He controlled gambling, loan sharking, cybercrime operations, and technology businesses that laundered criminal proceeds. His organization was sophisticated, leveraging technology and data infrastructure that made traditional law enforcement approaches ineffective. Chin Hae himself was brilliant with technology. He'd built his criminal empire through combination of strategic violence and technological superiority that made his operations difficult to infiltrate or disrupt. He maintained strict operational security. No permanent relationships, no family that could become leverage, no personal attachments that created vulnerabilities rivals could exploit. But during business operations in Los Angeles, he'd met Nala Lopez, software developer working for a tech company, brilliant coder, completely unaware that the venture capital investor she'd met at an industry conference was actually organized crime boss using legitimate tech investments as cover for criminal operations. They'd had intense 3-month relationship. Genuine chemistry despite Chin Hae's emotional barriers and Nala's growing suspicion that his business dealings weren't entirely legitimate. Chin Hae had ended the relationship when his investigation revealed that Nala was asking too many questions about his actual operations, demonstrating enough technical skill to potentially uncover his criminal infrastructure. He'd walked away cleanly. No explanation beyond saying the relationship wasn't working, no acknowledgement of the connection they'd built, just strategic exit from a situation that was becoming operationally risky. 2 weeks after ending the relationship, his security protocols had flagged that Nala was pregnant. Routine surveillance had identified doctor's appointments, prenatal care, clear evidence that she was carrying his child. Chin Hae had faced decision about whether to acknowledge the pregnancy or maintain distance. He'd chosen distance, implementing protocols to ensure Nala received anonymous financial support while he remained completely separated from her life and from the child's life. Money appeared in Nala's accounts from untraceable sources. Her rent was mysteriously paid for years. Resources materialized without explanation. All of this orchestrated by Chin Hae without his involvement ever being identifiable. Nala had tried to contact him when she'd discovered the pregnancy, but his security had filtered out all her attempts. From his perspective, the situation was managed, financial support provided, personal involvement eliminated, vulnerability avoided. From Nala's perspective, she'd been abandoned by someone she'd loved who disappeared without explanation, leaving her to raise their child alone with mysterious financial support that suggested he knew about the pregnancy but refused to acknowledge it. She'd given birth to a son, Rio. Beautiful child showing mixed Korean-Mexican heritage, demonstrating unusual intelligence from early age. By age 3, Rio was reading at first grade level. By age 5, he was coding simple programs. By age 7, he was teaching himself advanced computer science concepts through online resources. Nala had encouraged his gifts while also explaining age-appropriately about his father, that Rio's dad had left before he was born, that he didn't want to be part of their lives, that the mysterious financial support suggested he knew about Rio but had chosen distance over involvement. "Why doesn't my dad want to know me?" Rio had asked when he was 6. "I don't know, baby. Some people aren't ready to be parents. Your father made a choice to not be involved. That's his loss, not your fault. Can I find him? Can I make him explain why he left us? Maybe when you're older. Right now, focus on being a kid and learning and growing. Your father's choices don't define your worth. But Rio had never stopped thinking about the father who'd abandoned them. And as his technical skills developed, he'd started formulating a plan to do exactly what his mother had said to wait for: find his father and demand explanation. At age 8, Rio executed that plan through one of the most sophisticated cyber operations ever conducted by a child. He'd started by investigating the mysterious financial support. Money appeared in his mother's accounts regularly, but the sources were obscured through multiple shell companies and international transfers. Rio had reverse-engineered the payment patterns, identified the financial infrastructure, traced connections back through layers of corporate entities designed to hide the actual source. It had taken him 6 months of work, hundreds of hours spent coding analysis tools, breaking encryption, following digital trails that were designed to be untraceable. He discovered that the money came from a network of technology companies and investment firms controlled by someone named Shin Hae-young. Korean name, operating throughout Asia and the United States, connections to both legitimate tech businesses and to criminal operations. More investigation revealed that Shin Hae had been in Los Angeles 9 years ago, during the timeframe when Rio had been conceived. That Shin Hae had extensive resources and sophisticated security infrastructure protecting his operations. Rio had found his father. But finding him wasn't enough. He wanted confrontation, wanted explanation, wanted the man who'd abandoned them to know that his son had found him despite all the security designed to prevent exactly that discovery. So Rio had launched comprehensive cyber attack against Shin Hae's entire organization. He'd started by mapping the security infrastructure, identifying servers, encryption protocols, access points, vulnerabilities. Criminal organizations invested heavily in cybersecurity, but they rarely anticipated threats from 8-year-old children with genius-level coding abilities and deep personal motivation. Over 3 weeks, Rio had systematically breached every layer of Shin Hae's security. He'd penetrated financial systems, accessed internal communications, identified operational details about criminal activities, documented everything in preparation for the confrontation. The final breach was the message displayed simultaneously on every screen in Shin Hae's organization: I found you. You abandoned my mother. Now you answer to me. Followed by detailed information proving Rio knew everything about Shin Hae's operations, his identity, his location, his criminal activities. And followed by an address in Los Angeles where Rio would be waiting for Shin Hae to meet him. Subscribe to see what happens when an 8-year-old's genius turns into weapon of personal vengeance. When the man who thought he'd covered his tracks discovers his son inherited both his intelligence and his determination, and whether a father who chose abandonment can face the child who breached his empire just to demand answers. Comment where you're watching from, and tell me, would you hunt down a parent who abandoned you if you had the skills to do it? This story is just beginning. Shin Hae's first response to the breach was professional assessment of the damage and the threat. His cybersecurity team analyzed the intrusion, trying to determine who had executed such comprehensive breach of their infrastructure. The attack came from Los Angeles, his chief security officer reported. Single source, residential IP address. The sophistication suggests nation-state level capabilities or elite hacker collective. But we can't identify the actual operator. They covered their tracks exceptionally well. What did they access? Everything. Financial records, operational communications, security protocols, personnel files. They had complete access to our infrastructure for at least 3 weeks. Could have stolen funds, could have exposed operations to law enforcement, could have sold information to rivals. Instead, they just left the message. The message about abandoning someone's mother. That's personal rather than professional attack. Yes, sir. The attacker knows your personal history, knows about a relationship in Los Angeles 9 years ago, knows enough to frame this as revenge for abandonment rather than as standard criminal cyber attack. Shin Hae felt cold recognition. 9 years ago. Los Angeles. Nala Lopez and the child he'd learned about through surveillance but had never acknowledged. The address where they want to meet. Have you investigated it? It's a modest house in East Los Angeles. Registered to Nala Lopez. Our intelligence suggests she's been living there for 8 years, working as software developer, raising a child alone. The child's age? 8 years old. Male child, name listed as Rio Lopez. Birth timing consistent with your relationship with his mother 9 years ago. Chinhei processed that his 8-year-old son, a child he'd never met, never acknowledged, deliberately distanced himself from, had just executed one of the most sophisticated cyber attacks his organization had ever experienced. An 8-year-old breached our security? We can't confirm the child executed the attack personally. Could be his mother using the child's identity as cover, could be hired hackers working on behalf of the family. No. It's the child. Nala is talented developer, but this level of sophistication suggests obsessive focus that comes from personal motivation. An 8-year-old hunting the father who abandoned him would have that motivation. And if he inherited technical aptitude, he'd have capability. Sir, you're suggesting an 8-year-old defeated our cybersecurity infrastructure? I'm suggesting my 8-year-old son, who inherited my intelligence and his mother's coding abilities and who spent years wanting to find me, had the motivation and apparently the capability to do exactly that. The question is what he wants now that he's found me. The message said you have to answer to him. That suggests he wants confrontation or explanation. Then I'll provide confrontation. Arrange transport to Los Angeles. I'm meeting my son. Chinhei arrived in Los Angeles 2 days later with minimal security detail. Bringing armed guards to meet an 8-year-old seemed excessive, even though that 8-year-old had just proven he was capable of causing catastrophic damage to criminal operations. The house was modest, well-maintained, showing evidence of careful budgeting. The mysterious financial support Chinhei had provided had given Nala stability but not wealth. He knocked on the door. Nala answered, looking shocked and then furious to see him. You. After 9 years of silence, you show up at my door because my son hacked your security? Your son is very talented. He breached infrastructure that's supposed to be impenetrable. I'm impressed and concerned in equal measure. You're impressed? He spent 6 months obsessively tracking you down because you abandoned us. He taught himself advanced hacking specifically to find the father who walked away. That's not impressive, that's traumatic response to abandonment. Is he here? I'd like to meet him. You'd like to meet him? Now? After 9 years of deliberately staying away despite knowing he existed? Yes. Now. He demanded I answer to him. I'm here to provide those answers. Nala looked like she wanted to refuse, but a voice from inside the house interrupted. Let him in, Mom. I want to talk to him. Rio appeared behind his mother. 8 years old, small for his age, wearing glasses, looking completely calm despite the enormous breach he'd executed and the confrontation he demanded. Chinhei saw himself in the child's features. The bone structure, the intense focus, the controlled demeanor that suggested intelligence operating several steps ahead of the current conversation. You're Chinhei Yang. You're my father. You left my mother when she was pregnant and you've been sending anonymous money for 9 years instead of actually being my dad. The directness was startling. Chinhei had expected fear or uncertainty, not calm accusation from an 8-year-old. That's accurate. I left your mother because I determined the relationship was operationally risky. I provided financial support anonymously because I didn't want involvement in your life. Why not? Why didn't you want to know me? Because involvement creates vulnerabilities. My profession makes relationships dangerous. I thought maintaining distance protected you and your mother from those dangers. That's stupid reasoning. You protected us from your dangerous life by abandoning us, but you also made my mom raise me alone and you made me grow up without a father. The protection came with huge costs you didn't consider. You're right. The costs to you and your mother were higher than I acknowledged when I made that decision. Are you sorry? I don't know. I'm sorry you and your mother struggled. I'm not sure I'm sorry about the decision to maintain distance, because I still believe involvement would have created different dangers. But you're here now. So something changed. What changed? You breached my security and demanded I answer to you. That changed the calculation. You already know who I am and where I am. Distance is no longer possible. So I'm here to provide the answers you demanded. Rio studied his father carefully. You're not what I expected. I thought you'd be scary or mean. You're just logical. You make decisions based on calculations about risk and benefit. You calculated that abandoning us was less risky than being involved. That's accurate assessment. But you didn't calculate that I'd be smart enough to find you anyway. That I'd inherit your intelligence and my mom's coding abilities and that I'd use those gifts to hunt you down. That was miscalculation. It was. I underestimated what my 8-year-old son would be capable of. I won't make that mistake again. What happens now? You've seen me, you've explained your reasoning. Do you leave again? Do you stay? What's your calculation now? Chin-hei realized he was being assessed by a child who thought like he did, strategic, analytical, focused on understanding motivations and predicting behaviors. I don't know yet. I came here to meet you and to understand what you want. What do you want from me now that you've found me? I want you to admit that abandoning us was wrong. Not just strategically incorrect, morally wrong. You hurt my mom. You made me grow up without a father. Those were bad things you did that can't be justified through risk calculations. Why do you need me to admit it was morally wrong versus just strategically incorrect? Because if it was just strategically incorrect, you might make the same choice again under different circumstances. If it was morally wrong, you acknowledge that the choice itself was harmful regardless of the strategic reasoning. I need to know which one you believe. Chin-hei looked at this 8-year-old who was forcing him to confront questions he'd avoided for 9 years. It was morally wrong. I hurt your mother by leaving without explanation. I deprived you of a father through choice rather than through necessity. Those were harmful actions that can't be fully justified through strategic reasoning. I'm sorry for that harm. Do you want to be my father now? Or are you just here because I forced you to come? I don't know if I want to be your father. I don't know how to be a father, I've spent my life avoiding exactly that role. But I'm willing to try if you want me to try. Why would you try now when you didn't try before? Because you've proven you won't accept distance. You breached my security, found me despite all my attempts to remain hidden, demanded answers I couldn't ignore. If I leave now, you'll just come after me again. So trying to build relationships seems more productive than trying to maintain distance that you've already proven is impossible. Rio considered this logic. That's not very heartwarming reasoning. You're trying to be my father because I won't let you avoid it, not because you actually want relationship with me. That's honest reasoning rather than heartwarming reasoning. Would you prefer I lied about my motivations? No. I prefer honesty. Even when the honest answer is that you're only here because I made it impossible for you to stay away. Over the next 6 months, Chin-hei attempted to build relationship with the son who'd hacked his security systems to force confrontation. He visited Los Angeles regularly, spent time with Rio, tried to figure out how to be a father to a child who was both brilliant and deeply hurt by 9 years of abandonment. Rio was simultaneously forgiving and uncompromising. He accepted Chin-hei's presence but demanded complete honesty about his profession, his past choices, his current motivations for involvement. You run criminal operations, Rio said during one of their conversations. Gambling, loan sharking, cybercrimes that hurt people. That's what you do for money. Yes. That's accurate description of my business. Does it bother you that you hurt people for profit? Sometimes. I've rationalized it as business rather than as personal harm. But yes, I'm aware that my operations create damage beyond just financial losses. Are you going to stop doing criminal business? No. That's my profession and my organization. I'm not walking away from it. Then how can you be my father while continuing to do things that hurt people? Doesn't that create moral conflict? It creates significant moral conflict. I don't have good resolution for that conflict. I'm trying to be your father while continuing work that you correctly identify as harmful. Those two things exist in tension. That's honest, but it's not satisfying. I want you to be better than you are. I want my father to be someone I can be proud of, not someone who hurts people for money. I understand that want. I can't fulfill it while maintaining my current profession. You'll have to decide whether partial relationship with flawed father is better than no relationship at all. The conversations were difficult but genuine. Rio was processing complex moral questions about his father's profession while also building relationship with someone who'd been absent for his entire life. Nala watched the developing relationship with mixed feelings. "He's trying," she said to Rio one evening. "Your father is making effort to be present even though he has no idea how to be a parent. That's worth something. He's only trying because I forced him. If I hadn't hacked his security, he'd still be sending anonymous money and pretending we don't exist." "That's true. But he is here now, he is trying, and he's being honest about his limitations. Those are positive things even if the beginning was forced." "Do you still hate him for leaving?" "I don't hate him. I'm angry about the abandonment and about the years of struggling alone. But I'm also grateful he's finally trying to be your father even if the circumstances that brought him back were extreme. I'm not sure I can forgive him for abandoning us. Even if he's trying now. You don't have to forgive him to build relationship with him. You can acknowledge that he made terrible choices while also accepting that he's trying to be better. Both things can be true." 1 year after Rio's breach, Chinhei had built cautious relationship with his son. They talked regularly, Chinhei visited monthly. Rio had stopped actively hacking his father's security systems, though Chinhei suspected his son maintained access as insurance against future abandonment. "Why did you stay?" Chinhei asked Rio during one of their conversations. "After forcing me to meet you, you could have dismissed me as an inadequate father and moved on. Instead you built relationship with me despite my obvious flaws." "Why?" "Because you're honest. You don't pretend to be better than you are. You admit when your reasoning is selfish or when your choices were harmful. That honesty is valuable even when the honest answers are disappointing. What do you want from me long term? What does good relationship with your father look like?" "I want you to be present. To answer when I call. To show up when you say you will. To be honest about your limitations instead of making promises you won't keep. I don't need you to be perfect, father. I just need you to be consistent and truthful. I can do those things. Present, consistent, honest. That's achievable even for someone who's terrible at relationships. Can I ask you something else?" "Always." "The security breach. When you first discovered I'd hacked your systems, were you angry or impressed?" "Both. Angry that an 8-year-old had defeated security I'd paid millions to implement. Impressed that my son had the intelligence and determination to execute such sophisticated attack." "Why do you ask?" "Because I've been thinking about doing it again. Not to hurt your business, just to prove I can maintain access despite all your new security measures." "Would you be angry if I did that?" Chinhei felt something unexpected, pride mixed with concern. His son wanted to demonstrate technical superiority over his father's security systems as ongoing challenge. "I would be concerned about what you could access and what you might do with that access. But I would also be impressed by your capabilities. If you're going to maintain backdoor access to my systems, at least tell me you're doing it so I can monitor for actual threats versus just my son's testing." "You'd allow me to maintain access to your security systems?" "I'd prefer you didn't. But I'm also realistic about my ability to prevent it. If you're determined to maintain access, I'd rather know about it and establish boundaries about what you can and can't do with that access." "What are the boundaries?" "Don't steal money, don't expose operations to law enforcement, don't sell information to rivals, don't do anything that creates operational harm. Beyond that, maintain whatever access you want as insurance against me disappearing again." "You understand that I only maintain access because I don't trust you not to abandon us again?" "I understand completely. You've established technological leverage against future abandonment. That's strategic thinking I can respect even though it means my son has permanent backdoor into my criminal operations." 3 years after the breach, Rio was 11 and showing capabilities that exceeded even Chinhei's expectations. He taught himself additional programming languages, studied advanced cryptography, developed tools that improved on his father's own security systems. He was being recruited by tech companies despite being years away from legal working age. "What do you want to do with your abilities?" Chinhei asked during one of their visits. "You could work for my organization, we could use someone with your skills." You could pursue legitimate cybersecurity work. You could do research or teaching. What interests you? I don't want to work for criminal operations. I don't want to use my abilities to hurt people the way your business does. But I also don't want to waste my capabilities on boring corporate security work. What then? I want to use my skills to protect people from operations like yours. To identify criminal infrastructure and expose it. To be the person who prevents the kind of harm your business creates. Chin-hei felt complicated mix of pride and dismay. His son wanted to use inherited abilities to fight against everything Chin-hei had built. You want to work against criminal operations? Including mine? Not specifically against yours. But if criminal operations are harming people, I want to be someone who stops that harm. Even if it means working against my father's business interests. That would create direct conflict between us. I know. But you taught me to make decisions based on what's right rather than what's convenient. Fighting criminal operations is right even when it's inconvenient for my father. When did I teach you to make decisions based on what's right versus what's convenient? When you admitted that abandoning us was morally wrong rather than just strategically incorrect. That was you acknowledging that some choices are wrong regardless of the strategic benefits. I'm applying that same principle to how I use my abilities. Chin-hei realized his son had taken the moral admission he'd been forced to make and transformed it into principle that would guide Ryo's entire career, potentially in direct opposition to Chin-hei's operations. I'm proud of you for developing strong moral principles. I'm concerned about what that means for our relationship when those principles put you in direct opposition to my work. Our relationship doesn't depend on me accepting your work. It depends on you being present, honest, and consistent. You can continue criminal operations and I can continue fighting against criminal operations. Both things can be true simultaneously. 5 years after breaching his father's security systems, Ryo was 13 and already working with legitimate cybersecurity firms to identify and expose criminal infrastructure. He was careful never to directly target his father's operations, maintaining the boundary he'd established about their relationship being separate from their professional opposition. But he was absolutely targeting operations similar to Chin-hei's, using abilities he'd developed while hunting his father to fight against the kind of criminal enterprises his father ran. Chin-hei watched this development with complicated pride. His son had inherited his intelligence, had been forced into confrontation through abandonment, and had channeled both the abilities and the trauma into crusade against criminal operations. Do you regret it? Nala asked during one of their conversations. She and Chin-hei had built civil co-parenting relationship over 5 years, though never romantic involvement. Forcing Ryo to hunt you down by abandoning us? Creating the circumstances that turned him into someone who fights criminal operations? I regret the abandonment absolutely. But I'm proud of what Ryo has become. He's using his gifts to protect people rather than to exploit them. That's better outcome than if I'd been present in his life from the beginning. I would have probably influenced him toward my profession rather than against it. So the abandonment created the person he is? Partially. The abandonment created the motivation to find me. The confrontation created the relationship. The moral conflict between what I do and what he believes is right created his determination to fight criminal operations. All of that flowed from my choice to walk away 9 years ago. That doesn't justify the choice. No. The choice was still wrong. But the outcome of that wrong choice has been son who's better than I am, who's using inherited abilities for protection rather than exploitation. That's some consolation for the harm I caused. 10 years after an 8-year-old had breached his security to demand confrontation with the father who'd abandoned him, Chin-hei had built relationship with a son who'd inherited his intelligence, surpassed his technical capabilities, and dedicated himself to fighting everything his father's empire represented. Ryo was 18, working with international law enforcement on cybercrime operations, using abilities developed through hunting his father to dismantle criminal infrastructure throughout East Asia and the Americas. He'd never directly targeted Chin-hei's operations, maintaining the boundary that their relationship was separate from their professional opposition. But he'd absolutely damaged rival organizations that competed with his father's business. You're protecting my operations while claiming to fight criminal infrastructure, Chin-hei observed during one of their conversations. That's interesting moral calculation. I'm not protecting your operations. I'm just not targeting them directly. There's a difference. The effect is the same, my rivals are being exposed while my operations continue. Your operations continue because you're too smart to leave the kind of vulnerabilities I can exploit remotely. If you were sloppy, I'd expose you the same as I expose everyone else. So our relationship protects me only insofar as I maintain operational excellence? Exactly. The relationship doesn't create immunity from exposure. It just means I'm not actively hunting you the way I hunt other criminal operations. If you make mistakes, you'll face consequences like anyone else. That's fair standard. I can accept being held to same accountability as everyone else. Good. Because I'm not going easy on criminal operations just because my father runs one. You taught me to make decisions based on what's right rather than what's convenient. That principle applies to you too. They'd built relationship from worst possible beginning, abandonment that created hunting, hunting that created forced confrontation, confrontation that created cautious connection between father and son who represented opposite sides of the criminal justice divide. The 8-year-old who'd breached elite security just to find his father had become the 18-year-old who used those same abilities to fight criminal empires, maintaining relationship with his father while refusing to compromise his principles about protecting people from operations like the one his father ran. Vengeance had transformed into something more complex. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but acknowledgement that people could maintain relationships despite fundamental disagreements about morality and profession, that being family didn't require agreeing about what was right, only being honest about where each person stood. Intelligence becomes dangerous when paired with personal motivation and no adult boundaries to constrain ambition. Rio Lopez was 8 years old when he taught himself to hack because he wanted to find the father who'd abandoned his pregnant mother. That's not typical childhood problem-solving, that's genius-level obsession with personal vendetta. The breach wasn't about money or chaos. It was surgical strike designed to accomplish one thing: force confrontation with someone who'd spent 9 years avoiding exactly that confrontation. Their story proves that abandonment creates consequences beyond just absence. Chinhei thought walking away protected Rio and Nala from dangers associated with his criminal profession. Instead, it created circumstances where his son spent years obsessing about the absent father, developed extraordinary technical abilities specifically to hunt him down, and ultimately breached security that was supposed to protect billion-dollar criminal operations. That level of motivation combined with inherited intelligence created weapon more dangerous than any rival organization could deploy, a child who couldn't be anticipated, couldn't be defended against, and who had legitimate grievance that justified comprehensive breach of security infrastructure. It also proves that forced relationships can become genuine if both parties commit to honesty despite uncomfortable beginnings. Rio forced Chinhei into confrontation. Chinhei could have walked away again after providing superficial answers. Instead, he'd stayed and built relationship based on complete honesty about his limitations, his profession, and his selfish motivations for involvement. That honesty, admitting he was trying to be a father because Rio wouldn't let him avoid it, acknowledging his work was morally wrong rather than just strategically questionable, created foundation for relationship that survived fundamental disagreements about profession and morality. Most importantly, their story demonstrates that children inherit more than genetics. Rio inherited Chinhei's intelligence and Nala's coding abilities. But he also inherited the trauma of abandonment, the determination to find answers regardless of obstacles, and the drive to use his abilities for purposes that directly contradicted his father's profession. The 8-year-old who hacked criminal security systems to find his father became the 18-year-old who fought criminal operations as career, using abilities developed through hunting his father to protect people from enterprises like the one his father ran. That transformation from abandoned child to crusader against criminal operations flowed directly from Chinhei's choice to walk away. The abandonment created the motivation. The hunt created the capabilities. The confrontation created the moral framework that guided everything Rio did afterward. The father who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend to avoid vulnerability. The child who taught himself to hack specifically to hunt down that father. Both of them proving that some vengeance is terrifying not because it's violent but because it's calculated, executed by someone who inherited the intelligence to breach any system and the determination to hunt regardless of obstacles. If you loved this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about genius children executing sophisticated operations for personal reasons, forced confrontations that become genuine relationships, and abandoned sons who inherit abilities and use them to fight everything their fathers represent. Comment below, would you dedicate years to hunting down a parent who abandoned you if you had the technical skills to do it? Or would you focus on building your own life separate from their choices? Share your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and remember, underestimating what a motivated child can accomplish with inherited intelligence is a dangerous mistake. The 8-year-old you abandon might be the 18-year-old who dismantles everything you built. Not through violence but through capabilities you gave them by being exactly brilliant enough that they inherited your gifts and trauma enough that they developed the determination to use those gifts against operations like yours. Until next time.